so happy to be here to launch the second episode. I have Andy Wright here. And Andy, why don't you introduce yourself to everyone?
Hello, thank you. Yes, I'm Andy. I've been in this industry, the betting industry, for almost 20 years now. I'm currently Chief Betting Officer for 21st Group, which is a data intelligence business which has been around 10 or 11 years, based out in London. Lots of the legacy work is in football and helping football teams and competitions make more intelligent decisions based on data. And we're also working in the betting industry and in the sort of the supply side, so providing sports betting companies with expectancies for certain betting types. Think about football player props, so how many shots on target will Harry Kane have for Bayern Munich this weekend, that sort of thing. Happy to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, thank you, Andy, for joining. You have a really rich experience, and I'm pretty sure that it will be really interesting for the audience to hear it. And I've prepared a list of questions, a list of interesting questions that covers data, and that covers how the sports data could drive revenue to sports books and etc. So I like to ask you, what do you think? What specific data do you find like personally most valuable for increasing user engagement in sports betting industry?
Yeah, it's a good place to start. So data is obviously, the new oil, as it was referred to many years ago. I think from a user engagement perspective, there's probably two ways of thinking about data. I'm sure there's more than two, but two I'll sort of touch on now. One would be in terms of creating a fantastic betting proposition for a sports betting customer. So whether that's using the app or the website, whatever it might be. But how do you present the data, either historical data, so how many times does Harry Kane normally have shots on target in a game? Or sorry, how many shots on target does he normally have? Or equally, obviously, the game that you're currently watching and enjoying as a fan or as a customer, what's Harry Kane done so far to make you think he might have a shot on target in the next 10 minutes, whatever it might be. So very much using data to present a really easy to consume a visualization, a scoreboard, a sort of a box score in more familiar in US sports, but just nicely presented, very succinct data source, which is giving the customer basically a feel for the game and what's going on in that sporting event if they're not able to be watching it for themselves. So if you think from a customer's perspective, why would I bet if I don't know what's going on in this event? Like you're trying to sort of plug that gap basically and make them feel like they've got a good handle on what's going on in that sporting event. And then I think
Mm-hmm.
the other part would be, and everyone talks about it, but probably sort of personalization. So as a customer, there might be a million things you could bet on a sports betting app at any given time, and that's probably not actually that much of an exaggeration these days. And so, how do I find the 10 or 15 or 20 things that I would normally be interested in betting on? So, I might be a soccer customer that never bets on tennis. So, obviously, you want to promote soccer higher up in the display orders, make it easier for me to find. Whereas tennis, if they've never bet on tennis before, even if it's the Wimbledon final, maybe you still don't present that to them. So, I think taking customer behavior data to create a more personalized experience for customers just again helps them and encourages them to place a bet with you. Two sort of angles to that, but I think both are very pertinent.
Yes, yes. I think the future of the betting industry is, like you said, personalization, and the two ways. Yeah, two main ways here is about sports data. You mentioned, and the personal data from the users, right? And in terms of if we are going back to the sports data, to the first point, it is interesting, to know from your point of view what ways or what new or creative ways of presenting this sports data do you find most effective in customer engagement?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I think actually a little bit of this comes down to personal preference. So what you tend to find from my time working for sports books is there's many ways of doing this, and lots of sports books would have sort of again, let's just stick with football, soccer, right? A pitch visualization, so sort of where is the ball on the pitch at any given time. And there's some great products out there which will show you which player has passed to which player, and it's sort of almost like a football manager game that you'd see on a games console. And so you can almost start to picture like, are the left backs having a good game because they keep passing it well, or they're passing forwards, or whatever it might be. So that's one way. Similarly, again, most sports would present almost a sort of a text commentary. So it could just literally be like, this thing
Hmm.
happened, and someone's reading through that. And again, that works for certain individuals. And then probably the third way I touched on earlier is almost just a list of the key events that's happened. So obviously you'd get, what's the current score? How many corners has each team had? How many shots on target have they had? What is their XG to this point in the game? How many dangerous attacks have they had, etc., etc. Like, this data is so rich that's being captured now, and becoming increasingly more and more rich. Like, let's present that back to the customer. So again, it's all about the customer being able to build up a picture of that sporting event. So I think there's a little bit of personal preference in that, actually. And also, some customers have had a bet already, and they are interested to follow the performance of that bet. How's my bet getting on? Am I like, I bet this team, are they dominating? Other customers might be monitoring a game with a view to having a bet if the right situation occurs. And so again, they're slightly different customer requirements there as to like, how are they consuming, and what data do
Hmm.
they want, and how do they want it presented. So I think again, two sort of parts to it is like, can the industry how rich a data set can the industry collect, and that improves year on year, which is fantastic. And then how do we then present that to customers in as many different ways possible that doesn't become clutter, but
Hmm.
it creates optionality for customers to choose their preferred way.
Yeah, so currently, what do you see in terms of the sport books? Are they doing the good job in presenting and personalizing the sports data for the users, both pre-match and live? Do you think are they doing a good job from your point of view, or there is a place, a room to grow significant?
Yes and yes. So look, I've been doing this 20 years. I think if you go back 20 years, like, betting apps barely existed. We weren't.
Hmm.
The progress that's been made in that time is fantastic. And similarly, if you run back 10 years, if you like, a scoreboard on the Champions League final would probably just say the current score, and it might have a
Hmm.
little red dot if someone had had a red card. It's now obviously expanded, and there's so much information, and you can see which players have achieved which data points and that sort of thing. So it's pretty good now. I think maybe I'm too entrenched in the industry, and be interesting to get a view of someone who'd come from an e-commerce background, and in a slightly different space, and get
Hmm.
their views. But I would suggest they would say there's loads more that can be done, right?
Hmm.
When you think about, I don't know, visualization or heat maps, and how does that evolve, and how does that actually almost make it feel as if you're watching, like, you don't need to watch on TV, you can literally just watch the sports betting app, the sports betting company's app, and get a really
Hmm.
good feel for that game. So I'm sure there's loads more that can be done, in both in terms of data that's being collected and the speed of that, and then the speed that's processed and turned into some excellent UX for the customer.
Yeah, because from what I see at this moment, and I'm obviously not the expert like you are, but most of the sports books are doing widgets, or they are translating the video of the games. But
Yeah.
I think there is a big room for more engagement with the user in terms of presenting the data.
Oh, definitely. And there's some unbelievable products out there now of streaming the event, but that's overlaid with either highlight the player that you've had your bet on, and will they,
Hmm.
so you can easily see where they are. If it's an NFL game, you can see where that player is in the lineup. It could be like an overlay with, like, click on a player and it bets on them to score the next goal or the next touchdown, or the next
Hmm.
points in a basketball game, whatever it may be. So these developments are coming. They've happened. They're coming. They'll get better and better. So fantastic, and excited to see where between us all we can take the user experience, really.
And I'm curious, do you know the practical examples of implementation? Do you know the companies who are working on these products already?
Yeah, I've not been paid by anybody to name drop them on this, but I probably should have done. But no, I think like an obvious example there would be what Genius Sports have done with NFL, where
Mhm,
those streams via a company called Second Spectrum, like those streams are now very
mhm,
interactive, very rich with data, very quick for a customer to be able to watch, understand what's
mhm,
happening, and then place a bet all in one place. Gone are the days of like I've got my betting app, but I have to
mhm,
also have some sort of live score app next to it, and then I'm flicking from one to the next, or NFL.com, and those days are sort of quickly becoming behind us, where sports books you can log into a sportsbook app and you can use that for minutes and hours on end because all the information's there and you can consume it from one
mhm.
place.
Yeah, yeah. Agree on that. Let's move on to so we talked about the sports data for user engagement, right? But let's move on to the second part, which you mentioned, the customer behavior data. And this is really interesting to create, what, what role does this customer behavior data plays in creating more engaging content for bettors.
Yeah. So again, if you think about this, might be a bit of a tenuous, but you think about Amazon, and Amazon has
Hmm.
created, an unbelievable wealth, depth, breadth, whatever you want to call it, of content, right? You can pretty much buy anything you want on Amazon. But
Hmm.
similarly, it's never that hard to find the thing that you're after, despite there being millions and millions of items on within their database at all times. And I've had conversations over the years where someone would say, "Look at how cluttered this event page is. You've now got 1,000 markets on a football match. I can't find the thing I
Hmm.
want to bet on. Maybe we should reduce the number of bet things and the number of markets that we're offering." And I sort of understand the concept and why they've got to that point, but I think my pushback would probably be, isn't the solution here make it easier for that specific customer to find the specific thing they're looking for in that
Hmm.
moment? So if you think, and again, I think there's two parts to this. One is, what does the customer normally do? So my example
Hmm.
earlier of this customer, we've had them make it up for 3 years. They've never bet on tennis. Why would I put tennis, like in a prominent position in their experience? So that is probably getting in the way. They've never shown any inclination to bet on tennis before. But similarly, you've got to sort of tap into the narrative of the sporting event. So in the Premier League at the weekend, there was the game with the highest ever yellow cards, right? Now, as you're watching that game, all people really are talking about, commentators on social media, people in pubs watching the game, who's going to get booked next? Will there be a sending off? And so how you use that information to then curate your customer experience, I think is really important. If you flicked around, I was looking around the betting apps at sort of half time in that game, and some of them had responded really well to this. And so a couple of the sports books, and obviously in the UK, have got,
Hmm.
you know, price boost, there will be a red card in the second half, really tapping into that narrative of the first half, right? And then others to try and find the market for, will there be a sending off? You're having to scroll through hundreds
Hmm.
of other things. And I think that's sort of marginal gains territory. But as a customer, I was sat on the sofa watching that game thinking, all I can think about is who's going to get booked next because the referee is just yellow carding everyone and probably someone's going to get sent off. So help me help every customer find those markets quickly, but similarly and separately really, but use personalization on a sort of day-to-day basis to try and help the customer find the markets that they want to find. I think another
Hmm.
good interesting example from I worked at Fanatics in the US for a couple of years, and an interesting sort of use case or easy to understand example here is you have a database with lots and lots of people who buy things from Fanatics merchandise over the years. So you'd have a customer
Hmm.
who only ever buys LA Lakers jerseys, caps, whatever it might be. Like, well,
Hmm.
it feels fairly intuitive to then say, let's make sure that when they come to the sportsbook app, they can always find LA Lakers, the next LA Lakers game. Like if because they're probably a fan because all they ever buy from a merchandise perspective is LA Lakers gear.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no rocket science in the thinking there, but similarly using all the data that you have on someone to then create a world where they are more likely to have a bet with you is super important. So yeah, I think there's a long answer. Sorry, there's two parts to it. Is like
Mm-hmm.
specifically what do you know about that customer, and then similarly how do you use narrative of sport to make sure that you're presenting your content in the right way and in the right order at the right time to ultimately help the customer find the bet they're trying to have.
Yes, and it sounds really, it sounds really interesting and inspiring, but on the other side, it sounds really hard and complex to collect all of this data and also to translate it right to personal experience.
Yeah, 100%. And there's another great example looming this weekend. Again, this is a little bit UK centric, apologies, but the huge boxing fight tomorrow night, Joshua v Dubois. And now there'll be loads of customers out there who haven't bet on boxing for the last 2 or 3 months since the last big fight. So if you build a very sort of basic personalization layer, they're going to say, "Oh, this customer never bets on boxing, so don't present boxing to them." But this is like a super event where they probably will be interested. You can't get away from it on UK TV, media, etc. And so you're always going to need to have that layer of intelligence which says, okay, look, this is a huge boxing event, so let's make sure everybody can find that really easily on the app, and it's in front and center. And then also, then got to think about after Saturday night's fight, you might have had half of your customer base has had a bet on that event. They're not all suddenly boxing fans, and so don't start putting the sort of very average standard fights that might happen next weekend in front of them. They're super fight fans, and so you've got to again, none of this is rocket science, but you've just got to think through the way that you're designing any sort of personalization automation and use the data accordingly, but don't lose the ability to just think about sporting narrative and the narrative of sport.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. And I guess this should be a really systematic approach. And like you mentioned, like understanding your customer and presenting everything that will be vital, I think, for sport books to survive in future. And it's also, interesting in terms of we kind of jumping around here and there, but if we are going to the sports data, what do you think? What data sources outside of sporting events like weather data, player injury data have the greatest impact on the odds, actually, odds accuracy?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I mean the two things you said are good examples. Players, obviously, in all sports is a huge has a huge impact, right? I think there was a case in the US last week. I think there was a bit of injury news had sort of leaked through, and there was a reserve team player that was going to start, and their yards line was far too low given the team news that was coming. So team news is always super important, both from the accuracy of the odds, but also obviously important again for customers. And back to my narrative point, right? You need to be tuned into to that team news. So that will always make a difference. And I think just things like weather, obviously, if you're thinking about you get into the specifics of different sports, but who is the referee will have an impact on yellow cards and red cards in a football game. So there's all this information, and it's very difficult, to be fair, to particularly in team sports where you've got a bunch of different matchups. If that's in basketball or if it's football, you've got football 11, obviously 11 aside, all different matchups across the pitch. How does the style of the right winger affect the opposition's left back, and are they going to play differently today because that right winger will cut inside, or they're very fast, they're going to go down the byline. Like understanding and being able to react to these different relationships in sport is super important. And obviously in play become an enormous part of our industry over the last 10, 15 years as technology's improved. And so again, understanding like if this team goes 1-0 up, what do they do versus another team might go 1-0 up in a different situation and they might react completely differently. So, you're having your sort of pre-game expectancies, which create your very accurate odds lines, is one thing, and it's not easy. But then, as soon as things go in play and things start happening, a player might go off injured, a player might get injured but not go off, a player might get sent off, a team might score, etc., etc. Making sure that you've got the data capabilities to then back test your models and ensure that you're reacting correctly to a team going 1-0 up is infinitely harder than that pre-game pricing. So yeah, these are great challenges for trading and modeling teams to have. And then obviously they're always against a backdrop of customers demanding more and more betting opportunities, different types, different combinations. They want cash out available 100% of the time, so you need to have your markets available non-stop, but get the balance right of accuracy of prices as well, because we all know there's sharp customers out there waiting to pounce on bad prices, right? So
Hmm.
yeah, it's fascinating, and obviously like you say, weather's a good one. Again, very UK centric comment I'm about to make, but in rugby, it's well known that if it's the worse the weather, the lower the points scored. It's probably the same in
Hmm.
NFL as well, and so again, being able to react to different weather forecasts or actual in-game weather changes is super important. So I think lots of this stuff comes with experience, but lots of it comes with, and this is where AI and machine learning are starting to kick in. Is like, here's an enormous data set,
Hmm.
like tell me when strange things happen or when things regularly happen that maybe aren't obvious to the human eye or to the old school trader like myself. So yeah, it's a great time to be in the industry because so much progress has been made, and there's loads more to come as we all use data more and more intelligently, basically.
Okay, yeah. So, in terms of this, so basically, how would you rate, I think, from your point of view, how good are the data providers are doing the job in, in gaining all of the different data source and, in creating the odds? How accurate are they now, and how are they, using the different data sources?
And look, again, easy to say, oh, find specific examples where you can be critical, but in the main, if you think about the betting ecosystem, and there's 500,000 plus sporting events to bet on every year, and you think about, that is data being collected in basically real time with minimal latency from every corner of the globe
Hmm.
in some incredibly far-flung places, and very specific data being collected to an incredibly high degree of accuracy. Like it is quite remarkable the quality of the data that comes through. As I say, everyone will have examples where it didn't work or a
Hmm.
signal dropped or someone clicked the wrong button or whatever it might be. But in the main, it is quite fantastic, really. I think there's progress to come. Lots of sports are still reliant on somebody sat at a football stadium with an iPad clicking buttons, saying when there's been a corner or there's
Hmm.
been a substitution, there's been a goal. Now, you sort of think, and this needs people far more intelligent than me, but you think in 20 years' time, is that how data's still being collected, like very manually and reliant on humans? Like, I'm not sure. It feels like that's unlikely that that's where we'll be. But similarly, we probably all thought that 10 years ago, and we haven't. It hasn't progressed massively. And I know there's lots and lots of very smart people are trying to solve this problem now. So that's interesting to see how it comes. And then I think in terms of the odds accuracy, like I just talked about, in play it's really hard where you've
Hmm.
got data coming in, milliseconds after an event's happened from 10,000 miles away. How does the model react to that? Understand what's happening, almost look at historical data. How's the model built? Run another 10,000 simulations because someone's just scored a goal or been sent off, and create that whole set of odds again. And all this has to be happening in milliseconds because customers are demanding. I want to be able to place my bet. I want to be able to cash out that bet I already had. So you need your markets to be available. So are they unbelievably accurate? No, we all know that there's still lots of customers out there are winning money from sports books.
Hmm.
you'd think that accuracy will get better, but as I say, you've got to get the balance right of how accurate do these markets need to be versus the need for innovation, the need for creating new things for customers to bet on, and you can't, as a betting company, you can't be left behind because you need everything to be perfect. Basically, don't let perfection get in the way of good and of innovation, I suppose.
Yes, yes, that's really philosophical, and the balance is key, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
All right. So we have around 25 minutes of the recording. We could go through a quick blitz. We will be trying this for the first time. So let me
Okay.
ask you a couple of questions, and you can try be fast and exact. So
Right.
first, Andy, what is your favorite sport?
My favourite sport, football, but very fast becoming paddle.
Okay. Football, I assume since you are from UK, that means soccer for American ones, right?
Sorry for my American. Yes, exactly. Soccer. Yes, indeed.
Okay. What the most important sport metric for you?
Well, on football line, does your team win the game? Like ultimately, you can talk about expected goals and everything, and that is very important. But just ultimately the scoreline at the end of the game. I'd love to see England score more goals than the opposition in a final of a tournament one day, but we'll see. We keep waiting. But look, yeah,
Yeah,
from a
yeah, yeah.
data perspective, like something like XG is obviously well documented now, and that is important to understand. There's a lot of variance in sport, as we all know. So something like that has done a good job of almost normalizing the variance and giving you a better view of how did that game actually go, who was the better team, etc.
Okay, yes. Who is your favorite player?
Wow, my favorite player ever. Oh, what an unbelievable question! You could have teed me up for this. This is missing my audience, I'm sure, but there was a chap called George Best who played for Manchester United and Northern Ireland and in the late 60s, early 70s. And if you watch the old videos, the guy was a magician and he knew how to enjoy life as well. So I would say George Best.
Okay, so you will say like Leo Messi or someone who is playing now.
No,
Or,
well, yeah, that would have been an easy answer, wouldn't it? So we'll go with George Best.
yeah.
Showing my
Okay. Okay. And what is your favorite part of your job? Just a couple words.
just a couple of words. Watching sport and being paid to talk about sport all day and trying to, contribute to making the sports ecosystem even better for customers.
Yes, this sounds like a dream job. I
Oh
think
yeah.
everyone is in the industry or outside. I mean, in the industry enjoying, but outside of the industry, everyone seems that it's a dream job. So really cool. Any thoughts or insights that you would like to share in addition, maybe with our audience?
I hope this has been vaguely useful. Any thoughts? I don't think so. I think just if you're a sports book, just keep thinking about the customer and what does that customer need. It's a very competitive marketplace, and
Hmm.
increasingly people have less and less time. So how do you just make that experience as seamless as possible and look after the customer, and they will keep coming back and using your sports book. And I think just generally, like, let's as an industry, let's keep working together to improve data collection, improve how we're using data, make data,
Hmm.
the bedrock of everything we're doing, basically. So yeah, it's an exciting future ahead, and hopefully, I don't know when this will be published, but hopefully see some of my industry friends in Lisbon next week at the SPC event.
Sounds
If that's
good.
already been, then we had a great time in Lisbon, and it was great to see you all. Depends when you put this online. I don't know.
All right, yeah. And where can followers, listeners, follow your work? Yeah, you could advertise yourself a little bit.
Yeah, of course. So yeah, look, 21st Group, as I said, have been around 11 years now and doing some really fascinating things with data across the whole of the ecosystem, actually. And it's really appealed to my inner sports geek, being around these guys. So the best way to follow 21st Group on LinkedIn,
Mm-hmm.
and lots of our content and our work is shared is shared on there, or just give me a DM and I can certainly share some links with you. And we're in we're involved across the whole ecosystem. Be that if you're a football club and you need help with recruitment, if you're a sports book, you need help with either odds compilation or some of that content, like let us know. Basically anything in the ecosystem where data can make better decisions, then we're here to help.
Okay, and yeah, thank you so much for today's talk. I pretty sure that it's really valuable for the listeners. Thank you for sharing your thoughts and insights and really smart, insights in the industry.
Thank you for having me on, and best of luck with the podcast.
Thank you.
Take care.